My name is Eliora Vance, and I died with regret still clinging to my ribs. I do not mean that I almost died. I do not mean that I fainted or that I had a vision in the quiet of prayer. I mean my heart stopped. My body went cold. The room kept breathing without me, and in the stillness that followed, when sound thinned and the weight of flesh slipped from my bones, I crossed a threshold I cannot uncross. I never wanted to speak of it. There are truths that feel too holy for microphones, too dangerous for public air. There are revelations that demand silence because once they are spoken, nothing returns to the way it was. I have held this in my chest like a sealed wound. I have prayed for permission to forget it. I have begged for the courage to remain quiet. But I made a vow. When breath returned to me like a borrowed mercy, when my heart began again against all explanation, I promised that if I lived, I would tell what I was shown, not for attention, not for argument, but out of obedience. He called my name in the dark, and when he did, the darkness did not feel empty. It felt aware. It felt alive. It felt like a courtroom without accusation, like a sanctuary without walls. I was not alone in that vast and terrible gentleness. I was seen. He called my name in the dark, and what I was shown was not a spectacle. It was not thunder and spectacle and noise. It was a revelation about influence, about the weight of being known, about how heaven measures a life long after applause has faded. I speak this carefully now, because the world is quick to misunderstand and slow to listen. What I was shown about the year 2026 is not a political prediction. It is not an endorsement, not a condemnation, not a banner to wave in anyone's defense. It is a revelation about spiritual accountability, about the burden carried by those whose names echo across nations. In that place beyond breath, I saw the year 2026 not as a calendar date, but as a turning of light, a moment when hidden things rise to the surface, a moment when influence, even influence believed to be past, is called to stand again before the mirror of eternity. And I saw the soul of a man the world believes it already understands. I saw Barack Obama not as a headline, not as a symbol carved into memory, but as a man standing beneath the gaze of Christ, not attacked, not praised, simply seen. He called my name in the dark, and I understood something that shook me deeper than death. Influence does not expire. Authority may shift. Titles may fade, but the weight of what was carried remains written in light. The truth must be told. Even as I speak, I feel the tremor of it in my bones. There are people who will wish I had stayed silent. There are hearts that will reduce this to commentary, to speculation, to noise. But this is not about parties or platforms. It is about the soul under the weight of history. It is about what heaven expects from those who have once held the attention of millions. Keep speaking. That whisper has followed me since I returned. It followed me through the sterile brightness of the hospital ceiling. It followed me through sleepless nights when I wondered whether silence would be easier. It followed me when I tried to convince myself that what I saw was too sacred to share. Keep speaking. Some truths are costly to carry. They burn against the ribs. They refuse to let you rest. What I was shown changes how we see power forever. It changes how we see leadership. It changes how we see our own quiet choices when no one is watching. He called my name in the dark, and when he did, I realized that every life, whether watched by billions or known by only a few, stands under the same holy gaze. The year 2026 is not marked in heaven as a contest of policies. It is marked as a moment of testing, a moment of invitation, a moment when the weight of former influence meets the call to deeper humility. The truth must be told, not because I am brave, not because I am certain, but because I promised. Because when death brushed my skin and eternity unfolded like a horizon without end, I was entrusted with something I did not ask to carry. He called my name in the dark. And I am speaking now because silence would betray that call, because obedience is heavier than fear, because what I was shown about responsibility, about influence, about the soul beneath the spotlight cannot remain buried. Keep speaking, so I will, because what he revealed about 2026 will force us to reconsider how heaven sees those we elevate, how heaven measures those we criticize, and how every one of us, public or hidden, will one day stand without titles, without applause, without defense. He called my name in the dark, and what I saw there will not let me go. Before the darkness opened and he called my name, my life was painfully ordinary. That is what unsettles me most when I look back. There were no omens written in the sky, no trembling earth beneath my feet. Only mornings that began the way most mornings do, soft light pressing against the curtains, the low hum of appliances, the ache of another day waiting to be endured. I would rise before the sun fully committed to the horizon. I would stand in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching steam curl upward like a prayer I no longer knew how to finish. I believed I was awake, but I was drifting. My mornings were disciplined but hollow. I checked the news before I checked my heart. I scrolled before I prayed. Headlines rushed toward me in relentless waves, markets, conflicts, speeches, accusations, celebrations. Faces of leaders flickered across my screen like constellations, rearranging themselves in the dark. Some praised, some condemned. All of them watched, and I watched with them. There was a strange fatigue in my bones that sleep could not cure. It was not physical exhaustion alone. It was a spiritual thinning, a quiet erosion of wonder. I still believed in God. I still whispered small prayers over meals and before bed, but my words felt rehearsed, not alive. My faith had become orderly, polite, contained. I did not realize how far I had drifted from the fire, returned to the fire. I did not hear those words then, but I feel now that they were already circling me like distant thunder. The world felt loud, louder than it had ever felt. Every voice demanded allegiance. Every platform demanded reaction. Every event seemed to carry the weight of catastrophe or triumph. I would sit at my table, phone glowing against my face, absorbing analysis of world leaders as if I were studying weather patterns, predictable, cyclical, dramatic. Sometimes the name of Barack Obama would appear in commentary, in retrospectives, in discussions of legacy. Sometimes other leaders filled the frame. I found myself reflecting on the strange burden of those who once held the highest offices, how their words linger, how their choices echo, how history refuses to let them fully disappear. And beneath that reflection, an unspoken question formed in me. Does influence ever truly end? When the motorcade is gone and the cameras have turned elsewhere, does the weight lift? Or does it settle more deeply into the soul? Does heaven forget what the earth has archived? I did not ask these questions aloud. They simply hovered like dust suspended in a shaft of morning light. There was a heaviness in the air in those months before my death. I cannot explain it in rational terms. Nothing catastrophic was unfolding in my immediate world. Bills were paid, conversations were polite, my routines were intact. And yet I moved through each day as though the atmosphere itself were thicker, charged with something unseen. I would walk outside and feel it pressing against my chest. Not fear, not panic, something quieter, something patient, awaiting. In church, I would sit among the congregation and feel the distance between my lips and my heart. The hymns were familiar, the scriptures were steady, but there was a dullness in my spirit, like a window that had not been opened in too long. I listened to sermons about humility, about repentance, about stewardship. I nodded. I agreed. But I did not burn. I had grown accustomed to the glow of screens more than the glow of prayer. He called my name in the dark. I did not know then how far from the dark I truly was. I thought I was simply tired. I blamed the news cycle, the pace of life, the relentless commentary about power and policy and global direction. There was always another analysis, another debate about what leaders had done or failed to do. It was easier to dissect their decisions than to examine my own soul. But sometimes, late at night, after the noise had finally dimmed, I would sit in the quiet of my living room and feel a strange unease. I would imagine standing before God with nothing but my ordinary days to offer Him. No podium, no platform, no historic signature, just my small, distracted life, and a tremor would pass through me. If those entrusted with nations must answer for their stewardship, what of me? If a former president must stand beneath heaven's gaze and account for his influence, what of the influence I carry in smaller circles, in my home, in my words, in my silence? Does influence ever truly end? The question grew heavier with time. I began to see leadership differently, not as spectacle, not as drama, but as weight. The weight of being seen by millions, the weight of shaping hope or fear with a single sentence, the weight of knowing that your choices ripple across borders. I felt compassion where I once felt casual judgment. I felt sorrow where I once felt detachment. Because beneath every office is a soul. Beneath every headline is a heart that will one day stand unshielded before eternity. You were brought here to remember. That refrain did not yet have words, but it was forming. Something in me sensed that I was forgetting something essential, forgetting that history is not merely written in ink, but in light, forgetting that applause and criticism alike are temporary, but the soul is not. My days continued in their familiar rhythm, wake before dawn, coffee in trembling hands, news before scripture, messages before meditation, the world first, God later. And each evening, as I lay in bed staring into the dim glow of my ceiling, I felt the quiet unease settle over me again, a sense that something was approaching not from outside, but from within, a reckoning not of politics, but of spirit. He called my name in the dark. But before he called, there was this long stretch of gray, this season of distraction, this slow cooling of devotion. I speak of it now because I want you to see the contrast. I was not a mystic waiting for visions. I was not fasting on a mountain. I was scrolling. I was sighing. I was surviving. Spiritually numb, but not faithless. Anxious about the direction of the world, but unsure how to respond. Subtly disconnected from the God I claim to trust. There is a particular sorrow in realizing that you can believe in God and still live as though eternity were distant, that you can discuss leaders and nations and global futures while neglecting the quiet state of your own heart. Return to the fire. If I had heard those words then, perhaps I would have trembled sooner. But the heaviness persisted. Conversations around me grew sharper, more divided, opinions hardened, certainties multiplied. And beneath it all, I sensed that heaven was not impressed with our arguments. Heaven was measuring something deeper. I remember one morning distinctly. The sky was pale, almost colorless. I stood by the window with my coffee and watched cars stream down the road, each carrying a life, a story, a private set of fears. I thought about how many of us move through our days assuming that the real drama belongs to those in office, those in power, those whose names appear in bold print. And yet, we are all being watched. Does influence ever truly end? The question would not leave me. Not as accusation, not as obsession, but as invitation. You were brought here to remember. Remember what? I did not yet know. Remember that every life matters beyond its public footprint. Remember that heaven sees differently. Remember that no season of influence, public or private, escapes the gaze of God. These thoughts were gentle, almost fragile. I did not understand that they were preparing me, that the unease was mercy, that the numbness was being exposed so it could be healed. He called my name in the dark. But before the dark came the gray, the ordinary, distracted gray of a life drifting just far enough from the fire to feel cold without knowing why. I tell you this because what followed did not erupt from chaos. It emerged from routine, from dishes in the sink, from headlines on a screen, from a heart that had grown tired, but not yet broken. And in that ordinary life, beneath the noise and beneath the fatigue, heaven was already leaning close. You were brought here to remember. I did not understand it then. I do now. You were brought here to remember. I did not understand it then. I thought the unease was stress. I thought the heaviness was simply the weight of living in complicated times. I thought the dull ache in my chest was exhaustion. It was not exhaustion. It was the edge of eternity brushing against my ribs. The day it happened was unremarkable. The sky was neither storming nor bright. The world did not tremble in warning. I moved through my morning with the same quiet distraction that had defined so many others. Coffee cooling beside me, headlines sliding past my eyes, the hum of ordinary life steady and unthreatening. And then, without drama, without announcement, my body betrayed me. A tightening began beneath my sternum, subtle at first, like a fist forming in secret. I tried to ignore it. I shifted in my chair. I inhaled deeply. The air felt thinner than it should have. The room tilted by a degree so slight I almost laughed at myself for noticing. Then the fist clenched. Pain bloomed outward, sharp and electric, radiating through my arms, up my neck, into my jaw. My fingers went cold. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, the sound strangely distant, as though it had happened in another house. Sound began to warp. The refrigerator's hum stretched into a low, distorted vibration. The tick of the clock slowed, each second dragging like a heavy chain across stone. My own breathing thundered in my ears, then thinned, then fractured into fragments of noise. I remember trying to stand. My knees failed me. The floor rose to meet my body with a softness that felt wrong, unreal. My vision narrowed at the edges, toward the world folding inward like a closing aperture. Colors drained, the ceiling blurred into pale abstraction. I tried to call out. No sound obeyed me. Panic surged, raw, animal, desperate. My heart slammed against my ribs in wild protest, and then it faltered. There was a stutter, a terrifying pause, a silence inside my chest that was louder than any scream. Time loosened its grip. I felt myself falling inward, not downward, falling through layers of sensation as if my body were a garment being peeled away thread by thread. Sound receded into a tunnel, not metaphorically, literally. The world compressed into a narrow corridor of noise, distant and echoing. I could hear movement somewhere beyond me, perhaps footsteps, perhaps my own blood roaring in confusion, but it was muffled, distorted, stretched thin. My vision dimmed to a narrow beam, a tunnel of gray, edges dissolving, light flickering at the farthest point. And then something impossible happened. I was no longer inside the pain. I was above it. I saw my body on the floor, still pale, awkwardly folded. I saw the broken ceramic scattered like white petals around it. I saw the shape of myself as an object in a room that had already begun to move without me. It did not feel violent. It felt astonishingly quiet. The panic that had gripped me seconds before evaporated like mist under a rising sun. Fear loosened its claws. The urgency that had consumed my nerves dissolved into a strange, expansive calm. I was aware, but I was no longer bound. The world below me moved with frantic energy. I sensed motion, hands, voices, the rush of emergency, but it felt distant. Oh, as though separated by thick glass. Their urgency could not reach where I was suspended. I hovered, not in space as we understand it, but in awareness, untethered, weightless, watching the scene unfold with a clarity untouched by fear. And in that suspension, I realized something with a quiet shock. I was not alone. There was a presence in the stillness, not yet visible, not yet defined, but undeniable. Silence overtook the chaos. It did not silence the world below. It transcended it. A deep, enveloping quiet wrapped around me like warm water. The frantic movements beneath me blurred further, dissolving into insignificance. The tunnel widened. The gray thinned. Light began to gather at the far end, not harsh, not blinding, but alive. It pulsed gently as though breathing. It did not glare. It invited. I felt drawn toward it. Not pulled by force, but by recognition. He called my name in the dark. The memory of that call echoes now, but in that moment it was not yet words. It was familiarity, a knowing deeper than language. The light was not merely brightness, it was awareness. It knew me. As I moved, or perhaps was carried toward it, the last threads of panic fell away. I saw my body grow smaller in the distance, the room fading like a receding shore. The noise of sirens and voices thinned into nothing. There was no pain, no regret, only a vast and steady calm. I understood then with a clarity that trembles in me even now that death was not the annihilation I had feared. It was a crossing, a doorway so subtle and so immense that it required the collapse of everything I thought I was. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. The phrase formed in me as if etched in light. I did not hear it spoken. I felt it written across the atmosphere of that place. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. My world had been shaken, my small, distracted world of coffee and headlines and quiet spiritual drift. My heart had stopped. My body had fallen. The illusion of control had been shattered on the kitchen floor, and in its place there was light. The tunnel expanded into a vastness that defied dimension. I was no longer moving through a corridor. I was emerging into something immeasurable. The light intensified, but it did not burn. It warmed, it welcomed. The last attachment to my physical form dissolved like mist under the rising dawn. I was fully there, fully aware, fully alive in a way I had never known while breathing. He called my name in the dark, and this time the call was unmistakable, not sound, not syllables, but identity spoken into being. I felt myself known completely, every memory, every compromise, every quiet doubt I had carried in those gray months before my death. There was no accusation in that knowing, only truth, and the truth was gentle. As I drew nearer to the source of the light, I sensed that what awaited me was not spectacle, not thunder, not spectacle of judgment, but revelation, not of others first, but of myself. The panic was gone. In its place was awe, the kind of awe that humbles the soul without crushing it, the kind that strips away pretense and leaves only what is real. The world below, its debates, its leaders, its restless arguments, felt impossibly small from that vantage, not insignificant, but fragile, temporary, like ink that can fade. And I understood that I was being led towards something that would change how I saw all of it. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. My heart had been shaken into stillness. My breath had been stripped away. My body lay motionless on a kitchen floor. And yet, I had never felt more awake. He called my name in the dark, and I moved fully into the light. And I moved fully into the light. It was not a place in the way earth defines place. It was not bound by horizon or wall or ceiling. It was a vastness that felt intimate, an expanse that somehow leaned close. The tunnel I had passed through did not end abruptly. It unfolded into a living radiance, as though I had stepped from a narrow corridor into the heart of a sunrise that never fades. The light was not static. It breathed. It shimmered with layers of color that had no earthly name. Gold that felt like wisdom, blue that felt like mercy, white that felt like truth without shadow. The light did not glare at me. It received me. It wrapped around me like warmth after a long winter, and I realized with trembling clarity that this was not merely illumination, it was presence. He called my name in the dark, and now the dark was gone. The air there was not air as we know it. It carried no weight on lungs, because I no longer breathed as I once did. Yet it was filled with awareness. Every movement within it seemed conscious. Every current of radiance carried meaning. I felt as though I were swimming in intelligence, immersed in a knowing that did not overwhelm, but embraced. There was sound, not noise, not melody in the earthly sense. It was a harmonic vibration, steady and layered, like thousands of notes woven into one continuous chord. It did not pierce the ears. It resonated through the soul. It was as if the fabric of that realm was singing quietly, not to entertain, but to affirm. I did not feel small. I felt known. The anxiety that had stalked me on earth, the subtle tightening in my chest, the restless questions about leadership, about the direction of nations, about the fragility of our world, was gone, not dismissed, transformed, seen from a vantage that made panic seem like a child's shadow on the wall. Peace that was not passive. It was alive. It held me in a way nothing on earth ever had. I felt every fracture within me soften, every unspoken regret rise and dissolve in the warmth of that radiance. The numbness that had clouded my faith was exposed not with shame, but with compassion. I understood that even in my drifting, I had been watched over. You were brought here to remember. The words formed within me with unmistakable clarity now, not accusation, not rebuke, invitation. Remember what matters. Remember what endures. Remember that eternity is not distant. It is the deeper layer beneath every fleeting day. As I moved further into that realm, I became aware of others, not in sharp detail at first, but as presences, distinct, luminous, gentle. They did not crowd me. They did not demand my attention. They simply were, like stars aware of one another without competition. Some felt familiar in a way that made my soul ache with recognition, though I could not place the memory in earthly terms. Others carried an ancient steadiness, as though they had long ago passed through what I was only now beginning to understand. There was no comparison among them, no hierarchy of pride, only harmony. The harmonic vibration deepened as I became aware of them, and I sensed that each soul added to it, not by effort, but by being. Their existence contributed to the resonance of that place, and I felt something that broke me open. Unconditional love, not sentimental love, not conditional affection that sways with performance, a love that saw the entirety of me, my distracted mornings, my quiet compromises, my half-hearted prayers, and did not recoil. It did not pretend those things were insignificant. It simply held them in the larger truth of who I was created to be. I wept, not with tears, but with release. The contrast with earth was staggering. On earth, love is often tangled with expectation, approval, fear of loss. In that realm, love was foundational. It was the atmosphere itself. It did not fluctuate. It did not depend on applause or agreement. It simply was. He called my name in the dark, and now I understood that the call had always been rooted in love, not in judgment. The memory of my earthly anxieties seemed almost fragile in that light. The endless commentary about leaders, the debates about legacy, the quiet worry about what 2026 might hold for the world, all of it felt smaller, not trivial, but reframed. I saw how tightly we cling to narratives, how fiercely we defend opinions, how easily we forget that every public figure is first a private soul. The peace in that realm did not erase responsibility. It clarified it. Influence, I began to sense, was not measured by volume, but by obedience, not by popularity, but by alignment with truth. The harmonic vibration around me seemed to affirm this silently, like a choir that required no conductor. You were brought here to remember that heaven is not impressed by spectacle. Remember that eternity does not bow to headlines. Remember that every soul, whether known by billions or by none, is weighed by love and truth. As I continued forward, anticipation began to gather within me, not fear, but a holy expectancy. The light ahead intensified, not in aggression, but in intimacy. It was as though I were approaching the center of a vast heart. The presences around me seemed to pause, not in restriction, but in reverence. I sensed that what lay ahead was singular, not merely another layer of light, but the source from which the light flowed. The harmonic vibration softened into something deeper, steadier. The air, if I can still call it that, felt charged with purpose. I realized that everything up to this point had been preparation. The tunnel, the detachment, the peace, the love, all of it had steadied me for what was to come. He called my name in the dark, and now I was approaching the one who had called it. I felt no urge to hide, no instinct to defend. The transparency of that realm made pretense impossible, and yet I did not feel exposed in shame. I felt invited into truth. Every layer of who I had been on earth, The distracted mornings, the unasked questions, the quiet concerns about leadership and legacy rose within me like pages turning. I sensed that I was about to understand them differently. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. I saw now that the shaking was not cruelty. It was mercy. It stripped away illusions. It broke the crust around a heart that had grown comfortable in distraction. Return to the fire. The phrase pulsed within me like a heartbeat. Return to the fire. The fire was not destruction. It was purification. It was clarity. It was love burning away what did not belong. As I drew nearer to the center of that living light, I felt the full weight of my vow forming even before I had consciously made it. I understood that whatever I would see next would not be for private comfort. It would be entrusted. It would require obedience. The peace around me did not waver. The love did not thin, but the anticipation deepened. You were brought here to remember, and I was about to remember something that would reorder how I saw power, how I saw influence, how I saw the year 2026 and the souls intertwined with it. He called my name in the dark, and I stepped into the heart of the light. The light does not break in all at once. It gathers, it breathes, it becomes aware before it becomes visible. I feel him before I see him. There is a gravity in that realm, but it does not pull downward. It draws the soul upward, inward, deeper into truth. The atmosphere trembles, not with fear, but with holiness. The peace I had begun to feel in the crossing now intensifies, concentrates, becomes almost unbearable in its purity. And then I understand. I am not alone. He called my name in the dark. The presence approaches like dawn approaches a silent valley. There is no footstep, no shadow, no dramatic unveiling. Only recognition, ancient recognition, the kind that makes you realize you have always known someone even before you knew you existed. The light begins to take form, not confined by edges, not limited by shape, but somehow personal, intimate, near. Compassion radiates first, before holiness, before authority, before glory. Compassion, it surrounds me like warm water. It enters memory. It touches the places in me I never let anyone see, the shame, the fatigue, the quiet compromises, the prayers I stopped praying because I thought they no longer mattered. And nothing is hidden, not because I am exposed, but because I am understood. Complete understanding. That is what overwhelms me. Every motive I ever carried, every fear that guided a decision, every moment I stood silent when I should have spoken, every time I spoke when I should have waited, he sees it all. And he is not surprised. He called my name in the dark. Holiness rises next, not as threat, not as accusation, but as clarity. I begin to see myself the way heaven sees me, not inflated, not diminished, simply true, truth without cruelty, light without burning. There is no need to fall to my knees. My soul is already laid bare. There is no need to speak. He knows every word before it forms. And then the life review begins. It does not unfold like a film. It unfolds like a heartbeat. Moments surface, not chronologically, but spiritually. I see my childhood faith when I believed without hesitation. I see the slow erosion when ambition became louder than devotion. I see mornings when I scrolled endlessly through the noise of the world while the scriptures sat closed beside me. I see the weight I felt about leadership, not just political leadership, but influence in every form. I see the quiet judgments I made, the assumptions, the fatigue, the cynicism that crept in like a shadow and called itself wisdom. I see the times I sense the Spirit nudging me, write this, say this, pray here, stand there, and I delayed. Not rebelliously, just casually. Casual obedience, casual disobedience, both matter. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. That refrain echoes, not as a threat against nations, but as a shaking within me, my own foundations, my own allegiances, the structures I built in my heart that were never meant to hold the weight of eternity. He shows me the ripple of influence, a word spoken in frustration that shaped someone's insecurity, a post shared in haste that deepened division, a silence kept that allowed confusion to grow. Influence does not evaporate. It multiplies. And then, like a veil lifting, I see something greater. The moments of unseen obedience, the private prayers, the tears shed alone, the times I chose mercy instead of retaliation, the times I chose silence instead of pride. He magnifies those, not to flatter me, but to reveal the architecture of eternity. Nothing offered in love is lost. Nothing surrendered in obedience is wasted. He called my name in the dark. Fear dissolves completely now, not because I am innocent, but because I am held. The holiness that once would have terrified me now feels like home. I understand something I never fully grasped on earth. Judgment in His presence is not humiliation. It is alignment. And then He speaks, not with sound, but with certainty that pierces deeper than language. You were brought here for a reason. The words settle like living fire. You were brought here for a reason. I realize this moment is not only about my death. It is about my life. About why I was allowed to cross and yet still remain aware, about why the heaviness I carried before the collapse had been intensifying. This message concerns influence and responsibility. It transcends politics. It transcends nations. It transcends platforms. Influence is not measured by office, but by obedience. Responsibility is not assigned by popularity, but by calling. I see leaders, some known to the world, some hidden in small towns and quiet homes. I see teachers, writers, parents, pastors, executives, artists. I see how every sphere carries weight before heaven. Authority is not evil. Power is not corrupt by nature, but both demand surrender. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. I understand now. The shaking is not spectacle. It is mercy. Structures built on ego must tremble. Systems built without reverence must fracture. Hearts hardened by comfort must crack open. Return to the fire. The refrain rises again. Return to the fire, not the fire of outrage, not the fire of ambition, the fire of first love. The presence of Christ intensifies, not in brightness alone, but in intimacy. I feel seen beyond performance, known beyond reputation, loved beyond usefulness. And then comes the surrender. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. I release the need to defend my past. I release the need to justify my motives. I release the illusion that I was ever in control. Everything I thought I built was dust. Everything He breathed on still burns. Tears, if they can exist in that realm, fall from a place deeper than emotion. They are tears of recognition, of wasted time, of gratitude, of awe. You were brought here for a reason. The reason is not to escape earth. The reason is to return differently. He begins to unfold a vision, not images in sequence, but impressions that carry weight. I see the earth trembling, not collapsing, but awakening. I see hearts stirred by crisis. I see exposure of hidden things. I see leaders confronted not merely by opposition, but by conscience. I see a generation hungry for authenticity. I see believers who must decide whether their faith is cultural or consecrated. Return to the fire. The call intensifies. Return to the fire. I understand that my crossing was not reward. It was commissioning. I was allowed to see so that I could testify. I was brought into the holy atmosphere not to escape accountability, but to embrace it fully. He called my name in the dark, and now I know why. I had asked before the collapse whether influence ever truly ends. Standing in that presence, I see the answer clearly. Influence never ends. It echoes into eternity. Every decision is a seed. Every word a stone thrown into waters that do not stop moving. There is no small obedience. There is no insignificant compromise. All of it lives. All of it speaks. The compassion in His presence steadies me. The holiness refines me. The understanding humbles me. And in that convergence, I realize something that breaks me open entirely. He does not want spectators. He wants surrendered stewards. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. And I am part of that shaking, not as a judge, not as a prophet of doom, but as a witness who crossed and returned, a witness who saw love that burns and burns without consuming, a witness who cannot remain silent because I made a vow in the silence between heartbeats. If I live, I will tell it. He called my name in the dark, and I will spend the rest of my days answering. I return carrying fire in my bones, not fire that consumes the innocent, fire that refines the willing. I stand before you now because I said I would. In the silence between heartbeats, when eternity pressed against my awareness and time felt like a fragile thread, I made a vow. If breath returns to me, I will not bury what I was shown. I will not dilute it to protect comfort. I will not sharpen it to wound. I will speak it as it was given, clean, trembling, and burning with love. He called my name in the dark, and what He unfolded next was not spectacle. It was accountability. Return to the fire. The theme of accountability. In that holy nearness, I began to understand leadership the way heaven understands it. Leadership is not a title. It is stewardship. Influence is not applause. It is weight. Authority is not ownership. It is borrowed light. Every position, public or hidden, carries a ledger, not a ledger of achievements, a ledger of hearts affected. I saw how heaven measures legacy differently than earth. Earth counts platforms, followers, policies, applause lines, headlines. Heaven counts surrender, integrity in private hours, decisions made when no one is watching. Heaven weighs the invisible motives that anchor visible actions. Influence does not expire. There is no retirement from responsibility. You may leave the stage, but the echo of what you built continues to move through generations. Words once spoken still breathe in the minds of those who heard them. Decisions once made still shape the paths of strangers you will never meet. Influence does not expire. I've felt this truth settle like gravity inside my spirit. We imagine that time erases consequence. We imagine that stepping away dissolves accountability. But heaven sees continuity where earth sees closure. He called my name in the dark, and He let me see that no soul escapes the tenderness of evaluation. Not condemnation, evaluation. The loving examination of a father who asks, "What did you do with what I placed in your hands?" Keep speaking. The truth must be told. B. Vision of 2026. Then the atmosphere shifted. The vision widened. I saw a year rising like a horizon heavy with stormlight, 2026. not as a date on a calendar, but as a threshold. The air around the earth felt charged, as if history itself were holding its breath. Nations trembled not only from external pressures, but from internal fractures long ignored. A global tension pulsed beneath headlines, transitions unfolding. Old alliances tested, new voices emerging. I felt a moral crossroads approaching, not merely political, not merely economic, but spiritual. A moment when decisions would no longer be disguised as strategy alone, but revealed as reflections of the heart. Public voices would be tested, not only for intelligence, not only for strength, but for humility, for courage that bends toward reconciliation rather than dominance, for the willingness to admit imperfection. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. The shaking I sensed in 2026 was not random. It was revelatory, masks thinning, narratives unraveling, leaders standing at crossroads where every choice would echo far beyond their lifetimes. Keep speaking. The truth must be told. See, focus on Barack Obama. And within that widening vision, I saw a familiar figure, not as a symbol, not as an emblem of ideology, but as a soul. I saw Barack Obama, not framed by podiums or applause, not defined by party or policy. I saw him in quiet, contemplative, prayerful, a man who once carried immense authority, now standing at an internal decision point that transcended office. I did not see accusation. I did not feel condemnation. What I sensed was weight. The weight of legacy. The weight of influence that does not fade when terms end. Influence does not expire. Heaven was not measuring speeches. Heaven was not replaying debates. Heaven was searching the heart. I saw him aware, deeply aware, that the world still watches, still listens, still draws meaning from his voice. And I felt the question surrounding him. What will you do with what remains? This was not about criticism. It was about calling. Heaven measures the heart. I saw an invitation extended, not dramatic, not theatrical, an invitation toward moral courage, toward reconciliation that dares to bridge divides others profit from widening, toward unity, not as slogan, but as sacrifice, toward humility that does not protect reputation at the cost of truth. Return to the fire. I felt that refrain echo not only over him, but over every leader who has ever tasted power. Return to the fire of first love. Return to the simplicity of why you began. Return to the conviction that service is sacred. He called my name in the dark. And in that light, I understood the prophecy was not about elevating one man or diminishing him. It was about reminding a soul that influence is stewardship until the final breath. A public voice being tested. Tested not by critics alone, tested by conscience, tested by heaven. Influence does not expire. D. Universal expansion. And then the vision expanded beyond one figure. It spread like rings across water. This word was never confined to a single leader. It was a mirror held before all who carry influence. Presidents and pastors, activists and artists, parents and teachers, entrepreneurs and elders, public figures accountable before God. Private individuals equally accountable. There are no minor roles in eternity. You who shape conversations online, you who mentor a single child, you who manage teams in quiet offices, you who craft laws, you who preach, you who post, you who vote, you who whisper counsel behind closed doors. Influence does not expire. Heaven does not rank souls by visibility. It measures faithfulness. It measures whether the platform, large or small, was used to heal or to harm, to reconcile or to divide, to elevate truth or to manipulate it. Keep speaking. The truth must be told. I tremble as I say this because I know it includes me. The vision did not place me above the message. It placed me inside it. I saw my own life weighed, my own opportunities evaluated, my own silence scrutinized. Return to the fire. In 2026, I sensed a narrowing of options, a clarifying moment when neutrality would feel less possible, when public figures would sense the pressure to either inflame division or labor for unity, when humility would look like weakness to some and courage to others. A moral crossroads, and the invitation would not be shouted, it would be whispered. He called my name in the dark. He calls every name in the dark. The prophecy is this: accountability is not postponed. Influence is not forgotten. Leadership remains stewardship until the final breath. And in the year approaching, hearts will be tested more than strategies. I speak this not to provoke fear. I speak this because I was commanded inwardly. Keep speaking. The truth must be told. I do not know every detail of how 2026 will unfold. I was not shown headlines. I was shown hearts. I was shown crossroads. I was shown the possibility of reconciliation if humility is chosen, and deeper fracture if pride prevails. The world must be shaken before it can be restored, but restoration is possible. Unity is possible. Moral courage is possible. Return to the fire. He called my name in the dark, and I carry this now like a sacred burden, not to exalt myself as messenger, not to position myself as judge, but to fulfill the vow I made when eternity brushed against my soul. If I live, I will speak what I was shown. Influence does not expire. Keep speaking. The truth must be told, and so I speak.